Reflexive pronouns and verbs in Spanish. Rules and examples. Welcome to a new grammar video. This time, we will learn what reflexive pronouns in Spanish are, where to place them in sentences, and how to conjugate reflexive verbs in the simple present. Let's get started. What are reflexive pronouns? Reflexive pronouns are words like me, se, te, nos, which unlike personal pronouns such as yo, tú, indicate that the subject carries out an action that gets reflected on him or her. For example, in the sentence, Él se baña todos los días, he takes a bath every day, the word él is a personal pronoun that refers to a subject such as Pedro or Carlos, while the word se is a reflexive pronoun that indicates that the bathing action affects him directly. Where should we place reflexive pronouns? We must always place a reflexive pronoun just before the verb when used in a sentence. We have to choose which reflexive pronoun to use depending on the subject in the sentence, as there is a specific reflexive pronoun for each personal pronoun, as shown in the following chart. Yo me, tú te, él, ella o usted se, nosotros nos, vosotros os, ellos ustedes se. For example, we will place a reflexive pronoun me after the personal pronoun yo to make sentences such as yo me visto, and we will use the reflexive pronoun se for él or ella to say ella se peina. Reflexive verbs in Spanish. Spanish verbs usually end in ar, or ir, just like the verbs amar, tener, and vivir. However, we recognize reflexive verbs because they end in infinitive plus se in their base form. Some of the most common reflexive verbs in the language are afeitarse, bañarse, cepillarse, despertarse, dormirse, acordarse, maquillarse, sentirse, ponerse, irse. Forming sentences with reflexive verbs. To form sentences with these verbs, we follow the structure subject plus a reflexive pronoun plus a conjugated verb plus a complement. In most cases, the verb is conjugated following the rules for regular verbs, and there are special cases. Let's take 3 reflexive verbs as a reference and form sentences with them. Bañarse. Yo me baño. Tú te bañas. Él se baña. Nosotros nos bañamos. Vosotros os bañáis. Ellos se bañan. Ponerse. Yo me pongo ropa. Tú te pones ropa. Ella se pone ropa. Nosotros nos ponemos ropa. Vosotros os ponéis ropa. Ustedes se ponen ropa. Irse. Yo me voy. Tú te vas. Usted se va. Nosotros nos vamos. Vosotros os vais. Ellos se van. Notice that in all these sentences we keep the same reflexive pronoun for each subject. For example, we use me in all the sentences that begin with the pronoun yo. If we replace the reflexive pronoun me for another one, then that pronoun will no longer be reflexive. In the same way, the verb poner, to put on, is conjugated like any regular verb that ends in er, except for the pronoun yo, since it undergoes a spelling change and it is considered a special case. Finally, the verb ir, to go, which is used reflexively on some occasions, is an irregular verb, so you have to remember its conjugations and use them properly. Meaning changes with reflexive verbs. There are many verbs that can be used with or without reflexive pronouns. For example, we could say, Yo me duermo todas las tardes, or just, Yo duermo todas las tardes. And in this case, the meaning or message would be the same for both sentences. However, there are verbs that behave differently. Such is the case of verbs like encontrar, to find, llamar, to call, negar, to deny, and several more. Pay attention to these examples. Ella se encuentra bien. Ella encuentra dinero fácilmente. In the first sentence, we use the reflexive pronoun se along with encontrar to indicate how she feels mentally or physically. On the other hand, in the second sentence, we don't use a reflexive pronoun. So the verb encontrar means to find in this context. Tú te llamas Alex. Tú llamas a Mercedes. In the first sentence, by using the reflexive pronoun te plus the verb llamar, we are given the name of a person, whereas in the second, without a reflexive pronoun, the verb llamar refers to talking on the phone. Using reflexive pronouns and verbs. Let's put the rules that we have explained so far into practice in one last example. Pay attention to how reflexive pronouns reflect the actions on subjects in the text. The reflexive verbs you'll find in this example are llamarse, bañarse, ponerse, alistarse, levantarse, irse, quedarse, reunirse, llevarse, pelearse y divertirse. Ellos son mis amigos. Ella se llama María y él se llama Pedro. María se baña a las 6 de la mañana, pero Pedro se baña a las 7. A las 6:30, María se pone su uniforme y se alista para ir al trabajo. A las 6:30, Pedro aún no se levanta y sigue durmiendo. María se va al trabajo a las 7 de la mañana, mientras que Pedro se queda dormido un rato más. Nosotros nos reunimos de vez en cuando. Nos llevamos muy bien, aunque ellos se pelean de vez en cuando porque son muy distintos. Yo me divierto mucho con ellos. We have reached the end of this video. We hope that you learned a couple of new things with us. Remember to like it, subscribe and share. Hasta la próxima.